In this video, a homeowner association sued me for painting a flag on my barn. I am not even an HOA member, but they tried to mess with my farm. Let's dive right into the video. So I was 3 months out of high school when 9/11 happened and everybody seemed to be joining up the military. We didn't know if a draft was gonna happen or what, but I was young and healthy, so I joined up. I did not know what to expect or the things that I was gonna go through during that time. However, I did become a patriot for this country and the bonding between soldiers that happened. I know that now it can be debated if sending troops was the right thing or not, but at the end of the day, just remember that I was just a low guy on the totem pole, not one making the decisions. I was one of 3 guys in my unit to make it back alive, and I was kind of a mess of a person at that time from what I saw. My dad knew that it would be good for me to stay close to home, but deserve my own space, so he did something really generous for me. He took a part of the farm, broke it from his property, and then sold it to me. Basically for nothing, I was able to have my own farm but also be right next door to my family if I needed anything. Also, my mom was always dropping me off nice meals to eat. Without them, I probably would not have ended up doing so well, but soon I was back to being a farmer and did not think much of the fact that when I signed the legal documents for the property, I did not even know what an HOA was at the time and figured that it was some suburban thing and did not know that they existed out here where there are a lot of farms. Well, before I knew it, I had been back for a couple of years and wanted to do something to honor my fallen brothers when Memorial Day came rolling around. I had a barn for my cows and I decided that I was gonna paint something on the side of it. It took me a long time and I refused to let anybody help me, but after about a week of work I had a big American flag painted onto the side of my barn. I thought it looked pretty good. The stripes might not have all been 100% even or straight lines, but from the road you couldn't tell that anything was wrong. Keep in mind that this story took place back in the early 2000s before the flag became the political symbol that it is today. I was not putting it up because I was trying to support voting for a certain person or something. I was doing it for the guys that I lost. I had some people see me and tell me that they liked my flag and a few other veterans that told me they thought it was really cool. My area had a kind of meeting thing for veterans once a month and I was a regular, so I knew some of these guys that fought around the same time I did or even back in the older wars like Vietnam. It was the weekend before Memorial Day started that I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. I still didn't really know who they were, so I did what most clueless guys in their 20s do and went to my parents for help. They explained to me that they created certain rules in order to keep the area neat and maintained, and they were claiming that I broke a rule by painting the American flag on my barn, giving me some code for a bylaw that I would need to go and try to find myself in order to see if it was real. They were also demanding that I paint over the flag and also had to pay them a $200 fine. The thing was that I was never a member of the HOA in the first place, so even if it was a rule, it did not apply to me. I did manage to get a copy of the bylaws in town and looked up the code that they were talking about. It did not have anything to do with flags or painting barns. The only thing that code talked about was graffiti and gang signs not being allowed. I knew we had some small gang activity in the area, so I guess it was to stop members from tagging their own homes. This was not a gang sign or graffiti though, it was the American flag. I went to speak to them because I figured there must have been something miscommunicated on their end. My dad went with me since he knew that I could get a little worked up and angry with confrontation, a side effect of going to war I guess. The HOA guy we spoke to told me that there was no mistake and that my American flag was against the rules to paint on the side of my barn. I told him that I was not gonna pay a fine or remove it since I was not a member of the HOA, but he tried to tell me to refer to my notice, but I told him what the rule he was referring to said. Also that as a veteran I took offense to him calling the American flag a gang sign, as it turned out the HOA president was very anti-military and anti-government. He has the right to be, but he doesn't have the right to stop me from showing my patriotism. He did not buckle and told me to get rid of it and to give them money or the HOA would take my property away. He also claimed that the flag devalued the entire neighborhood and by having it, it means that I didn't care about my fellow men. I wanted to punch his lights out but obviously couldn't because I didn't want to get arrested. Although that might have been worth it this time. Anyway, instead I contacted all of those veterans that I met up with every month and the local VA to tell them what happened and what was going on with the HOA. It's a pretty small place, so a lot of them were in the same HOA and not happy about it. They started writing letters and getting signatures from people to let me keep the flag and to not have to pay them anything. The HOA could have given up right there and then, and it would have been peaceful, but instead they doubled down on it not being allowed. Messing with one veteran is a bad idea, messing with multiple is even worse. However, messing with a bunch of veterans that have also spent most of their life working on a farm was probably the dumbest thing they could have done. We were stubborn even before the army got a hold of us. We went to the news where the HOA did not want to make any kind of statement aside from one. They claimed that their rules were in place for a reason, and just being a veteran did not mean that I was allowed to break those rules. When asked them to specify the rule and why a flag was supposedly so problematic for them to the point that they were going after a non-member was when they shut down. We even managed to get a lawyer to agree to help us for free through the VA, and we were gonna take this to court for me. During this time they had also called the police on me, both for the flag and some nonsense report that I was storing guns and drugs in my barn. I let them search it since there was nothing in it and explained to them the problem I was having. The police were on my side and I was not gonna be given any issues from them. Court takes time, so Memorial Day had of course passed, and at the time the flag was still up. I disobeyed the HOA's order, but since I was currently in a legal battle, they could not take any further action against me until it was resolved. If they won, then they could probably fine me a lot more or try and take my land. Since part of their argument was claiming I should be forced into joining the HOA. So well, we did get a nice Memorial Day with a lot of people coming by to see the barn and have a drink for all the friends we went over there with and couldn't bring home. The court date did come and the HOA was really sticking to their guns with that story. Instead of trying to claim it was some different rule, they were now saying the American flag fell under the code rule of gang signs and graffiti. My lawyer argued that the American flag was not that, and at the end of the day none of this mattered because I was not a member. Then he pulled out something that changed everything. I already knew about it of course, but for you guys I waited until it was most dramatic. So the HOA had given out fines for multiple people having American flags in their yards, again stating vague bylaw codes that did not even say directly anything about it. This proved that they were just against the flags or the government or something, and the judge asked me straight out why I wanted to paint a flag on my barn in the first place. I told him that I had lost friends in the war and I wanted to paint them a flag that they might be able to see from heaven. I did not want to make a statement or something or try to hurt anybody, and between what I said, the vague fine, the past fines, and finally the amount of support I had, the court found that I had no reason to need to follow the HOA rules when I was not a member, and even if I was, the flag would not be a problem. I was allowed to keep it up for as long as I wanted and nobody could make me take it down. Again, at this time many people were patriotic and waving flags all over the country, so the HOA was really in the small minority of not wanting it around in the neighborhood. Some of you with the modern day lenses might see the flag as a problem, but back then it made people feel better. The HOA was not off the hook though, even after the court situation, because people were still beyond mad at what they did. It can be hard to run an HOA when the entire town basically hates your guts and any idea you have would get shut down immediately. The main people in charge of it ended up leaving and new people came in their place that did not seem to have the same harsh viewpoints. Don't get me wrong, they still enforced some annoying things that any HOA would, but there wasn't anything hugely problematic about them anymore. The only other thing I want to mention is what I saw the next spring when Memorial Day was coming around. It seemed like every house in the neighborhood had put out flags and some other farmers had even painted their own flags on their barns. It was really nice to see and it made me feel good that I was back home at a place that supported me during the hardest time in my life. Since then I've been happy working on my farm and have gotten married and had a couple kids. I think I deserved some years without any excitement after all of that was said and done. And the next one is titled, Is my HOA legally allowed to tow my husband's work van? And by the way, if you still enjoy the HOA stories, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much. So I am based in Tamarack, Florida. My husband's work van, Ford Transit, was towed overnight. Later on we found out it was our HOA president who lives across the street from us that did it. Since it was a work van, we have not been able to get it out of the pound because it's owned by a company and we need all sorts of legal paperwork and it's becoming more expensive by the day. We intend to have the HOA pay for the release of the van since we believe it goes against HB 1203/2024 that went into law on July 1st. Any help would be appreciated, thank you. Edit, my husband will try to get the van out of the pound today and then we'll get a lawyer to deal with the rest. I just needed to know if we were in the right and it seems we are. I appreciate your help. Comment number 1 said, I'm confused whether the 4 spots are in your driveway or reserved spots in an HOA community parking lot. Based on the post above, a community parking lot might not be protected. Either way, I would consider strongly the potential legal and financial ramifications of continuing to live in this HOA if they towed the vehicle from your assigned spot without at least sending a letter warning of that outcome. Comment number 2, even if you intend that someone else pay for it, it's your responsibility to minimize costs. You have to get the van out of impound ASAP. Assuming that you live in Florida, it looks like you're correct. Under Sec 9(3)(b), it looks like the HOA is not allowed to tow a work vehicle from anywhere that you are legally allowed to park it. This is definitely something you should speak with the HOA president about. If the president does not agree and continues to tow your vehicle, you will have to go to court. You might also want to bring this law to the towing company to let them know that they are allowing the HOA to break the law and they might not care, but maybe it's one of those good towing companies that only exist in your imagination. Anyway though, keep notes of everything. Depending on how far the HOA takes this, you might need a real attorney instead of going to small claims. Update to the story, after my last post things moved quickly. My husband managed to get the van released from the impound lot that afternoon, though it cost us $425 for the towing and storage fees. His boss was understanding and helped us get the necessary paperwork together, including proof of ownership and insurance documents. The real fight started when we confronted our HOA board. I emailed them formally requesting reimbursement for the towing fees, citing HB 1203, which specifically prohibits HOAs from towing commercial vehicles used by residents for business purposes when parked at their primary residence. I made sure to keep copies of all communications, and our HOA president Karen, yes really, responded by claiming the law did not apply in our case because our HOA bylaws predated the new legislation. This was completely wrong. The new law specifically states it supersedes existing HOA restrictions. I had done my homework and I knew our rights. When they ignored our follow-up emails, we attended the next HOA board meeting. Karen tried to skip over us during the resident comment section, but I stood up anyway. I would like to address the illegal towing of our vehicle, I said firmly. Several other residents turned to listen. We have already addressed this matter privately. Karen tried to shut me down. No, you've ignored our communications about violating state law HB 1203. I replied, and I think our neighbors should know that their vehicles could be next. This got people's attention. It turned out we were not the only ones who had had issues with arbitrary towing by the HOA. 2 other residents spoke up about their experiences, including one whose teenage daughter's car was towed while she was home from college. The HOA's attorney, who was present at the meeting, looked uncomfortable. During a break, he pulled Karen aside and we could see them having an intense discussion. When the meeting resumed, Karen announced through gritted teeth that the board would review our towing policies to ensure compliance with current legislation. But we were not settling for vague promises. I'd already contacted a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. She confirmed that we had a solid case here and sent a formal demand letter to the board. The letter outlined, number 1, the specific violation of HB 1203, demand for reimbursement of all towing and storage fees, additional compensation for loss of work time while dealing with the situation, and a deadline of 10 business days to respond. Notice of intent to pursue legal action if necessary. The threat of legal action combined with growing pressure from other residents who were now paying attention to the board's actions finally got results. The board called an emergency meeting and voted to reimburse us fully for the towing and storage fees, aka $425, and pay an additional $575 for our time and legal consultation fees. Also, they updated their towing policies to comply with current law. Also require board approval for any future vehicle towing, and also they have to post clear notices about parking rules and resident rights, but the most satisfying outcome was not the money, it was the changes in our community. Other residents started attending board meetings regularly, a group formed to review the HOA's other policies for compliance with current laws, and people began talking to each other about standing up to unreasonable enforcement. Karen resigned from the board 2 months later, citing personal reasons. The new board president, a retired teacher named Tom, has been much more reasonable. He actually reads the relevant laws and consults with residents before making decisions. My husband still parks his work van in our driveway, and sometimes when I see it there, I smile, thinking about how standing up for our rights helped create positive change in our community. The next one is titled Dumb Tow Truck Driver. So the cast is me, Mighty Elevator, RL Rude Lady, OF Officer, and TD Tow Truck Driver. A little backstory: I moved to a new city almost a year ago and started to take the bus to and from school. This all started in October, but I stopped dealing with her crap in January. Anyway, so I was waiting outside school one day and this lady came and parked right in front of the bus stop. I knocked on her window and she rolled it down. The following conversation ensues. Me: "Hi, do you mind moving your car? It's a bus stop." RL scoffs and rolls up window. "Now I have a short temper sometimes and this is one of those times." Couple minutes later, me slightly annoyed: "Please move your car." RL: "Huh, where else is there to park?" Many other spaces open. Me more annoyed: "Literally anywhere else. Get your eyes checked." I pointed to other spots. RL, F you, and drives to another spot. Now this is happening every day up until January, when I lose my mind. But during this time, I do some research and find out parking in front of the bus stop is illegal. Oh boy, am I ever happy for some sweet revenge. So I start taking some photos proving that she is parking illegally and write down her plate number and the address of where this is happening. Once I had enough evidence, I emailed the city bylaws department and they confirmed that parking there was in fact illegal. I also attached my phone number so they could call anytime. And they did. They asked me to call them when I saw her again so they could send a tow truck and an officer. Monday was the day. She of course parks in the bus stop again and I have a grin on my face. Me knocking on window: "Move your car. If you don't, I will call the boys in blue and get your car impounded." RL: "Ha, you won't. You're just a stupid teenager. No respect." "Just move, Karen." "No. Just wait and see where you park when you start driving. Not in front of a bus stop like a crackhead, that's for sure." "How dare you? I will tell the principal." "Well, try me." RL huffs and turns off the car. "I'm doing it now." She runs inside the school and I call the bylaws department. They say that they'll be there soon. About 5 minutes later, an officer and a truck shows up. The officer gets out and asks, "This is her car?" Me: "It sure is." OF: "Alrighty." Signals for tow truck driver TD, begins to prepare the truck and attach the car while the officer writes a ticket. RL comes storming out. "What in the hell are you doing?" OF: "You parked here illegally and your car is being impounded." "There is nowhere else to park." OF: "Does not matter. The law is the law." The RL starts yelling at the OF for a few minutes. In the meantime, the TD has hooked her car up to the truck and writes a bill. When RL has seemed to calm down, the officer handed her a ticket for a parking violation. The TD gave her the towing bill as well. RL's jaw dropped to Earth's core. OF: "The fee is $50 per day for your car being stowed in the lot." RL now fuming: "You cannot do this." OF: "Neither can you park in a bus stop." RL turning to me: "You little piece of crap. You did this." The bus turns around the corner and stops to let me on. Me: "Thanks OF and TD." I grinned and gave RL the bird as I got on. It is now April and I have not seen her since. The next one is titled Mighty Mailbox Revenge. I posted this as a reply to someone else's mailbox story. I was informed that it should be its own post, so here it is, edited slightly for clarity. This didn't start out as a quest for vengeance, we just wanted mail delivery to our house. Vengeance came as a byproduct, but it was truly delightful nonetheless. So, mailbox story time. This happened back in 1982 for the record. My folks moved to a very rural area on a gravel road. No one had previously lived here, so it was a battle just getting mail delivery in the first place. My folks went several rounds with the local postmaster. He was somewhat enamored with his own power and very much a rules to the letter kind of guy. Every I must be dotted, every T crossed, and if there's so much as a semicolon out of place, you'll have to start all over again. He seemed to have made it his personal mission to make getting mail delivery to a new address as difficult as humanly possible. Ultimately, my folks managed to fill out the paperwork to his satisfaction, and he begrudgingly allowed us to put up a box and receive mail delivery at our new home. Dad was extremely careful in the placement of our box and making absolutely certain that it was the exact height, precise placement from the road, etc. to avoid annoying our local postmaster any more than we already had. There are, or at least were, specific rules about rural mailboxes. Dad, of course, followed every single one. That first mailbox was perfect. The man who drove the road grader was as annoyed as the local postmaster, as he now had a new driveway to accommodate. We suspect that's why he had it out for our mailbox. After the road grader had demolished 3 of our mailboxes, Dad got pissed. Previously, he had used the most basic design, just a post in the ground with a box on top. Now he was motivated though. Dad got a hold of a 9-foot long section of metal pipe. It is 4 inches in diameter, outer measurement, and has 3/4 inch thick walls. I have no idea what this was originally intended for. But I know how Dad used it. He dug a hole 5.5 feet deep. He welded an upside down tripod shape, think open umbrella, to the bottom of the pole and dropped it into the 6-foot wide hole. Each welded on leg was about 3 feet of some kind of rebar, and there were 5 such spokes. He then dropped some huge rocks on top of the tripod shape to hold it in place. The empty spaces around the huge rocks were filled in with gravel, and he dumped sand to fill in the air gaps. Then he filled the rest of the hole in with dirt and mounted the mailbox on top of the post. 3 days after Dad installed the new mailbox, we heard the road grader coming down the road. Our house is a 1/4 mile from the road, but we heard the loud clang from inside. We also heard the cursing and swearing from inside. No one went down to look until they heard the road grader drive away. When they did, the box itself was slightly dented on one side, but it was still firmly upright and functional. 3 weeks later, we received a bill from the township for a bent grader blade. It was accompanied by a letter informing us that we had caused damage to city property because our mailbox was installed incorrectly. It would need to be moved, and we were liable for a bill of a couple of $1,000s worth of repairs. But here it where it becomes pro-revenge instead of petty. Recall the fact that the local postmaster was annoyed with us over our battle to get mail delivery? Well, Mom had made a point of each time we reinstalled the mailbox taking photographs down to the post office and having the local postmaster sign off approval of the height, placement, etc. She had done the same with Dad's superpost and had documented signed approval of the box dated the day before the road grader had bent his blade trying to demolish the box. She submitted copies of the invoice for the grader blade and the letter stating that the damage was our fault because our mailbox was incorrectly placed. Right to the post office. She also submitted copies of the official post office approval of the box to the township. This jerk of a postmaster was also quite prideful and became furious that his authority was being called into question by some podunk township. As far as he was concerned, the township was not questioning my parents, they were stating that his judgment was wrong. I don't know what went down between the postmaster and the township, but we received a second letter from the post office reiterating their approval of our mailbox. We also got a formal apology from the township and noticed that the road grader's contract had been terminated because he had lied about damage to city property. It was worded with a tone that said, "Please don't sue us because a contracted employee damaged your property." For the record, that post that installed nearly 40 years ago is still standing. We have replaced the box on top many times. That post, however, has now wrecked 2 cars and a truck in addition to that long ago road grader. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, I really enjoy these mailbox revenge stories. Even though they are kind of similar, they are always very satisfying to read. If you have ever gotten mailbox revenge on someone, especially the postmaster, then please let us know in the comment. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible, and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.